Okay, now we're there. Okay. Yeah, so we got up to the bottom. They were discussing the Machlokes, Rabbi Eliezer and the Rabbanon, but we left off with the Kasha. So I just want to start again from the Mishnah and quickly review what we learned yesterday. So we're up to the Mishnah, the second Mishnah on Daf Yutes Amud Beis. And it says as follows: Machzelas Kanim Gedoyla. If you had a large mat, Asal Shchiva, if it was made for Shchiva, for lying, so now it's something that's Royu Medris, and therefore it's Matamatum Medris, and we'll see soon by extension it's susceptible to all Tumas at that point. Mekabelas Tuma, it'll be Makabel Tuma, and therefore Ve'ein Misach Chimbo, because one of these symptoms, or one of the features that Schach has to have is that it's not Makabel Tuma. L'sikoch, if it was made for Schach, then Misach Chimbo, Ve'ein Mekabelas Tuma. Rabbi Eliezer says, Achas Katana, the Achas Gedoyla, it doesn't make a difference what size the mat is. Also, the Shchiva Mekabelas Tuma Ve'ein Misach Chimbo, L'sikoch Misach Chimbo Ve'ein Mekabelas Tuma. So there's a shaila in the Rishonim right off the bat as to what does it mean asa l'shchiva? Does that mean the manufacturer intended that its use should be l'shchiva, or does it mean the purchaser had in mind to use it for shchiva? Frankly, the manufacturer doesn't really care what the purchaser uses it for as long as he buys it. And there's a third shot that what it's made for, its designation, will depend on what in that area at that time what people use these things for. But of course, with your specific das, you can change it. And that's what the Gemara delves into. Hagufa kasha. It seems like in the Chachamim, in the Rabbanan alone, if you analyze their words, it's contradictory b'neubei. Because Amr also l'shchiva mekabelas tuma. The Tanakama said that if you had specific intention to use this mat for shchiva, then it's mekabel tuma. Then mesach. So I could be medai. Time of the asal shchiva. You have to have specific kavana that you're going to use it for shchiva. Hastama, but by default, if you just take a mat and there's no specific intention upon it, l'sikach, we say by default out of the box, it's made for schach. So that establishes that the default is mats are made for schach. But then v'hader tanim, a moment later, the Tanakama concludes, l'sikach misachachim ba, ve'enu kabelas tuma. So that seems to indicate that the default is that it's made l'shchiva, and that it is mekabel tuma. So it's contradictory between the first comment that the Tanakama said and the second comment that the Tanakama said. So the Gemara answers, Holoi kasha, kan b'gdoila kan b'ktana. In a large mat, we would say that it's stama l'schach. Therefore, the Mishnah says also l'shchiva. If you have specific havana for shchiva, then it's going to be possible for schach. But a smaller mat would normally be made. By default, it's designed to use to lie on. So therefore, it is mekabel tuma unless you had a specific havana to use it for schach. Zok Gemara, that helps to deal with the stiru neubei in the Tanakama. But if we move along to the Sefer of the Mishnah that presents Rabbi Eliezer Shita, we can't have such a teretz. Because Rabbi Eliezer Omer, achas katano, the achas kadoila. It doesn't make a difference what size it is. Also, l'shchiva mekabelas tuma ve'vesachim ba, and I can make the same deal. Time of also l'shchiva hastama l'sikach, and then when I go to the second half of Rabbi Eliezer's comments, emos seifa also l'sikach mesachim ba ve'nekabelas tuma. Time of also l'sikach. The reason why it's mutter to be used as schach is because that was your specific intention. Hastama, by default, l'shchiva, we would say l'shchiva. Morning, because I just reviewed what we did yesterday. Now we're up to exactly where we left off yesterday, which is 4 lines from the bottom on Yutes Amud Beis. And we have a problem that according to Rabbi Eliezer, who says his comments apply equally to a large mat and a small mat, what is the default? Is the default that it's l'shchiva, and therefore in order to be able to use it for schach, you have to specify that? Or is the default l'schach, and unless you specify l'shchiva, it'll be kosher for schach? So Rabbi wants to offer another teretz, Bigadoila. If we're talking about a large mat, which is what the Tanakama seems to be commenting about, Kula alma loy pligi, everybody agrees, is stamala sita. A large mat is normally not used to sleep on, it's used for schach. Ki pligi biktana. They only have an achloikis on the small mat. Tanakama Samar, the Tanakama, who seems to focus his comments only on the Gedoyla, says Stam Tana L'Shchiva. This that we are saying that out of the box we say it's considered Schach, that's only for a large one. But Tana would be L'Shchiva. And we have to get an understanding as to what these words mean. Because it says Machselas Kolim Gedoyla, also L'Shchiva Makabel Stoma, they Mesachim L'Sikoch Mesachim They Makabel Stoma. What does that mean in the Tanakama's words? So Rashi tells us as follows: it's not speaking where the ratio of the Tanakama's words are not B'Gdoila, and the Sefer are not B'Tana, which are value to the parish. The Imkain l'Rabbi Elazar lo mitarz. You cannot say that half of the comments are speaking about a big mat, half a small mat, because you cannot keep that shot when you're trying to analyze Rabbi Eliezer. Ella of Rashi. Toshus argues on this, but Rashi says, "Ela kol sikoch the katoni imas nisan bein b'sefer the milson tanakamba bein Rabbi Elazar astamat." So let's read now the words of this Mishnah according to Rashi's understanding. Machzelas konem gedoyla also l'shchiva. Really, out of the box, is designed for schach. But if you specify that it's l'shchiva, then mikabelas tuma, then it will be makabel tuma ve'misachimba. But stoma, if you didn't specify at all, then automatically you say it's l'sika. And then misachimba ve'ina mikabelas tuma. So the way Rashi learns, the Tanakama is only referring to a mat that's a big mat. And the Tanakama is saying that a big mat by default is l'sika. And when it says l'sika, it means by default it's l'sika. And the only time you could change it from the default is if you have specific havana for the shchiva. That's how Rashi learns the words of the Tanakama. And then Rabbi Eliezer says, Achas katana v'achas kedoyla. I say l'kula, that a katana is also by default for schach, and also l'shchiva. If you specify l'shchiva, just like we said earlier in the Tanakama, makabelas tuma ve'v'sachim. But stamazoi, if you don't have a specific kavanah, you automatically say it's l'sikoch and misachim kaba ve'nim makabelas tuma. So what the Gemara is going to elaborate in is that the machlokes is that Rabbi Elazar is makel over the Tanakama. The Tanakama says only a big mat by default is for schach, but a small mat, the default is for lying down, and it will be makabel tumah. While Rabbi Eliezer argues l'kula, and he says even a small mat, the default is always l'schach and not l'shchiva. Okay, so let's see how the Gemara fears it us. Ela Amar Rava.
How big is big? How small is small? Things are a little vague over here. Is there a medium size mat?
I'm not sure. Maybe I didn't even think of your aura, so it's a very good aura. So let's, as we learn through the daf, let's focus on it and see if I can come up with a shear. Because you're right, it says big and small. Maybe there were default sizes. Maybe in those days, small was the size of a bath towel or a sleeping bag, and large was like an 8x8, like a tarp. But I'm not sure. It's a good aura. I didn't notice if there's any place that specifies the sizing. But as we look through the daf, we'll focus on it and we'll see if we can come up with something.
When you heard Tuma, wasn't it something that you can lie on? It has to be a mat that you would lie on.
Right. So a mat that you would lie on. So, right. That's what the general rule is. I just don't know if anybody says anything specific. It's all. Yeah. The default at first glance would be the size. But what does that mean? Does that mean 3 feet by 6 feet? How about if it's 5 feet by 12 feet? How about if it's a queen size? Today, it used to be Royal Shchiva was a small cot. Today, Royal Shchiva, you look at these king size beds, Royal Shchiva is the size of a small island.
What's the ratio to Ruben?
Yeah. And then we don't know what your Rubai could be. I remember one of the first trips that Dirshu made to Eretz Yisrael. I stayed with Ephraim alone. I shared a hotel room in the Merkaz Hotel, which was called the Prima Palace in those days, with Ephraim alone. There, the rooms are known to be particularly small. And I remember when we checked in, I said, I want one really wide but short bed and one really narrow but really long bed. When we checked in, and we ended up getting half of our request. Both our beds were short and both our beds were narrow. So his feet stuck out and my sides stuck out. So Ela Amarava, Bigdoila Kula Amalai Pligi, Distam Sikha. Large mats are not made to lie on the first star. Keep Ligi Biktana, Tanakama Savar, Stam Katana Lashriva, the Beleja Savar, Stam Katana, Nami Lasika. Vahachi Gamar. And now I already went through the Mishnah and touched it, but I got it from the Gemara. And the Gemara says this is how you would read the Mishnah. Machzelas HaKonim Gedoyla. This is the Tanakama talking. Also, the Shchiva, if you had specific intention for Shchiva, then Mekabelas Tuma Ven Mesachim Ba. Time of also the Shchiva. That's only if you have specific Kavanah for Shchiva. Hastama out of the box, by default, Nasik and me, also Lasikoch Umesachim Ba. We assume it was made Lasikoch. Ktana, if it's a small mat. Now, the way I touched the Mishnah, according to Rashi, is that the Tanakama is not talking about a small mat at all. He's only talking about a big mat. It's only Rabbi Eliezer who introduces a small mat. But the way Tosfos learns, it's a little bit different than what I touched. And he actually learns that the Tanakama is also directly addressing a small mat. And the way Tosfos learns, it would stem with these brackets. Katada also l'sikuch mesachim. Time also l'sikuch. You see, by Tana, the default is not schach. You have to specify the schach. Ostama nasik misha also l'schiva ve'ein mesachim. So, according to this Gemara that we just read, and according to what Tosfos understands the Mishnah at this stage, is that the Tanakama directly addressed a Tana, and the Rabbi Eliezer argues. And according to Rashi, the Tanakama is not talking about a Ketana at all, although we can figure out by process of elimination with a diuk what they would hold by Ketana. The reason why Tosfos doesn't like Rashi's Pshat is because Rabbi Eliezer's main machlokes with the Tanakama is what is the status of a Ketana. So it's not mistaber to say that Rabbi Eliezer is arguing on something that the Tanakama didn't even express his opinion about. Yes, we can be medayik from the Tanakama what he holds by Ketana. But if Rabbi Eliezer is arguing on a Ketana, it's logical to say that the remarks that the Tanakama made directly address the Ketana as well. So there's no difference in what each one would hold. There's just a difference in how to translate the second half of the comments of the Tanakama. But Rabbi Eliezer came to be Mekel and said, Echas Ketana, Achas Ketana, Achas Kedoila, it doesn't matter if it's a big mat or a small mat, Stama, Cherlish, Shikach. Out of the box, we assume it's a schach, and you're not going to lie on it, and therefore it will be kosher. So Amalei Abaye. So Abaye told Rava, I don't like your pshat at all, because let's have a look at the Lashon HaMishnah. Before I read it in the Gemara, I want to read it in the Mishnah again. So we'll go back to the Mishnah. Rabbi Eliezer is trying to say, not only is a gedola out of the box stamel l'sikuch, even the katana out of the box is stamel l'sikuch. But look at what he said. He said, achas katana v'achas gedola. If he's trying to say that a katana is also just like a gedola, he should have said achas gedola v'achas katana. That's the first problem that Abaye has with the way Rava learns the Mishnah. So let's look at the Gemara inside. Amalei Abaye. Yihachi Rabbi Eliezer Omer achas katana v'achas gedola. What he should have said was achas gedola v'achas katana miboyle. That's problem number one. Problem number one, Rava, is the way you're understanding the Mishnah. It doesn't even read well. But there's another problem, a much more structural problem, and that is, I'm going to prove to you from another source that ki pligi b'gedola hu the pligi. Not you're making two mistakes. A is the machlokes is not by a katana, the machlokes is by a gedola, and B is Rabbi Eliezer is not being mekel, Rabbi Eliezer is being machmer, Rabbi Eliezer the chumrah. So now we're going to have to have a whole new pshat of the Mishnah, because the way we learned it so far, that's not at all what it sounds like. So we're going to have to recalibrate everything here. So we're going to start from scratch. The Tanya, we have a brisa that says the following: Machzelas hakonim gedolim, a big mat misachichem. The Tanakama says you can use it for stuff. Rabbi Eliezer Omer im eino mikabelas tuma misachichem. If it's not makabel tuma, then you could use it for schach. What does that mean? So if we go into the Rashi, which is about 4 inches down, actually in the magnified screen it looks like 4 inches down. When I look down at the Gemara, it's only about 3 inches down. It's Rashi says, "And Eina Mekabelas Toma Kloimer in Beferish also the Sikach in Eloi Loi." Rabbi Eliezer holds even a large mat, unless you had specific havana to use it for schach, by default we would say that it is Mekabel Toma. Alma Yosif Amir's of Rashi, the Tanakama Stam Gedoyle L'Sikach. You see the Tanakama hold a large mat by default is for schach, and it's not Mekabel Toma, and therefore you can use it for schach. Rabbi Eliezer Stam L'Shchiva. You see Rabbi Eliezer holds even by a large mat out of the box by default, we say it's l'shchiva, and you have to specify that it's for schach. So since we know that Rabbi Eliezer is arguing about a mechzelas gdoila, and Rabbi Eliezer is being machmer rather than being mekel, we have a new pshat in the Mishnah. Ela Amar Papa, Piketano, a small mat, kul amaloi pligi distam l'shchiva. Everybody would agree that a small mat you cannot use for schach, because by default it's used l'shchiva. Keep pligi, the machlokes in our Mishnah is big gedola, and we're only speaking about a gedola. Tanakama sover stam gedola l'sikach, a gedola out of the box, you assume it's for schach. Rabbi Eliezer sover stam gedola nami l'shchiva. Not only is a ketana stam l'shchiva, but even a gedola stam l'shchiva. By also l'shchiva the ka'amar, what is also l'shchiva that the Mishnah says in Rabbi Eliezer's remarks? What does that mean? Hachikamar. What it means is stam asiya nami l'shchiva. We assume that by default, out of the box, it's always l'shchiva, and therefore it's going to be makabel tuma, and it will be possible for schach. Add the ovid l'sikach until you had specific kavana to make it for schach. So Rashi elaborates a little bit on how you read the Mishnah. So we'll do that too together with Rashi. Ella Amar Papa, umay also l'shchiva the katani b'milsa de Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer said if it was also l'shchiva, then it's makabel tuma. The problem with that is we just said a moment ago that Rabbi Eliezer holds by default everything is also l'shchiva. So on that the Gemara says Hachika Amar Iker Asi also l'shchiva. When the Mishnah says also l'shchiva, it means that by default every mat is made l'shchiva and every mat is makabel tuma. Ad avad le'lesikach until you have specific havana that you're using it for schach. That's how you read the words of Rabbi Eliezer, and the Gemara explains that. But the Gemara doesn't go back to explain how you read the words of the Tanakama. So therefore Rashi goes back to do that for us. Umilsa the Tanakama hochi mifresha kedukim nemeikar. Like we said originally, that Reisha B'Gdoila, the first set of comments that the Tanakama made were speaking to a large mat, kedukatani be'edya, right? The first comments of the Mishnah are that the Tanakama says that if you have a large mat, if it's also the shchiva, then you cannot use it. But stoma, like we were medayik originally, stoma, you could use it. The Sefer B'Ktana, the second half of the words that the Tanakama said was also the sikach. It's ksheira, means stoma, it's l'shchiva. V'achikamar, the im ketana he, if it's a small mat, which by default the Tanakama holds is tome, because it's also l'shchiva, but also the fairish l'sikach, but you specifically said I'm using it for schach, then misachachem ba. Hastama l'shchiva. But if you didn't specify at all, a small mat would be l'shchiva. Also, Rabbi Eliezer Meimar, and Rabbi Eliezer came to argue in the Tanakama, and he said, Af gedoila shavahi l'ktana. A large mat is like a small mat that by default is l'shchiva. If you avid l'stam have also l'shchiva, by default it's l'shchiva. Umikabel estoma, and therefore me'ein misachachem ba. I will also be fairish l'sikach, but if you specifically had kavana on a large mat for schach, then misachim ba ve'ena mekabelas tumah. I misspoke. It's both a large mat on a small mat. Either one by default is mekabel tumah, but either one you could specify that I'm not using it to lie. I'm only using it for schach, and therefore it will not be mekabel tumah, and therefore it will be a good suit.
The opposite, that a theory you can't just want to unmake it to be a theory.
So you're asking me a very good question. Everything is yored lidei tuma b'machshava, but you need a ma'aser to undo it. I really misspoke, so I'm happy you asked that question because it allows me to clarify it. When the Gemara is saying here, also on the sikach, it doesn't mean you bought it and it was, and you use it l'shchiva, and then you change your mind. Because you're right, you would need a maisa to change it. What it means is when you originally made it, you said this is l'sikoch, so then it never became tamei machmas akeli. Then it's l'schach.
But
once you actually designate it for a keli, you can't undo it with a mere words.
no, but according to Rabbi Elazar, it isn't going according to the machshava of the person making the mat. If the person would make the mat with shliva, then you would never be able to use it.
Well, that's not necessarily true, because if you hold like the Rishonim, that the kavanah of the person who made it is irrelevant, so then his kavanah wouldn't have an impact anyway. The question: at what point is there any impact at all? Okay, so let's see the Gemara back. Tanu Rabban. So this is the only complicated part of today's daf. The rest of today's daf is pretty much simplistic halachos. Tanu Rabban. Machzelas shall shiviv shall gemi. Now, if it was a nice sunny day, then we could contemplate a mat l'shchiva, because it's perfect for the beach. It's like a big beach towel, but it's supposed to be raining today. So we'll have to use our imagination about lying out on a mat on the white sandy beach with the waves lapping along the shore while you're being served the tequila. Okay, Tanu Rabbanan, Machzeles Shel Shifa. Oh, I just woke up. We're not on a sunny beach, and I don't hear the waves lapping on the shore. But for a second, it was good. Tanu Rabbanan, Machzeles Shel Shifa v'Shel Gemi. You had a mat that was made out of either shifa or gemi. These are different types of grasses. I think one is papyrus, has big green leaves, but I'm not sure what all these things are. Gedola, if it's a large one, misachachem ba, you can use it for schach. Kitana, if it's a small one, ein misachachem ba, you cannot use it for schach. Rashi tells us that these types of grass are soft, and no matter what type of braiding you made it out of, because there's different ways of making a mat out of these grasses. You could weave them, which makes a very smooth fabric, or you could braid them, which would be a very rough fabric. However, if the raw material is very soft by definition, even if you braid it like cotton, it would still be very soft. So the shifa and gemi, Rashi says, by nature are very soft grasses, and therefore, no matter what the pattern of the weaving, the crocheting, or the cording, no matter how you did it, it would be, if it's a small mat, it's going to be considered also l'shchiva. However, which are much harder substances, Rashi says one of them has a stem that makes it really hard. So gedola mesachachem. If it's and Rashi touches the gedola here as lashon gedil. If it's braided, which means it's going to be very hard, and you wouldn't be able to lie on it, even if it's a small mat, you could use it for schach, because no one's going to lie down on this, because the way you made it, it just will be not comfortable to lie on. But aruga, if you wove it, so then even though the substance, the raw material is hard, but it's a much smoother, softer fabric, then ein mesachim ba, then we say stama l'shchiva, and you cannot use it for schach. Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Yosy, said, Mishum Aviv, in the name of his father, achasu v'achasu mesachim ba. Either one you can use for schach. The chinhayer abdayis omer kedvara. So he holds any one of these mats you can use for schach. You can always use schach. So Rashi says, mesachim ba afilu ketana, even if it's small, the eina l'shchiva, it's not made to lie down. Let me see, avet stick ben chalaka beichel and kasha. Regardless, he says. So Reb Doisa is very makel, and Reb Doisa says that you can always use any of these mats for schach, because he holds it. Most of them aren't used to lie on. So let's keep that in mind. Reb Doisa is a makel. Reb Doisa allows you to use all types of mats for schach, because all types of mats aren't considered l'shchiva. Okay, Tanan Hasim. We had another brayso, another mishnah. Kol hachotzlois mitamen tamen meis. Any chotzlois, and that word is as yet undefined. Any chotzlois are mitamen tamen meis. Divrei Reb Doisa. The Chachamim Maimim medris. They're Tami Tumas medris. So Tumas meis means if a mace touches it, or if even a sheretz touches it. The Tumas mace is just used as an example of contact Tuma, La'afuke, Tuma because you lie down on it. So all of chutzlois are Tame Mace. That's what the Bais holds. The Chachamim, they're Tame Medrus. Frank the Gemara, Medrus in Tame Mace loy. Are you telling me that the Chachamim hold that these chutzlois, whatever they are only Tame Tumas Medrus, but they're not Tame Tumas Mace? Well, Anan Tanan, we learned in Mishnah that we mentioned earlier that Kol Matame Medrus, if something is Matame Medrus because it's something that's designed to lie upon, then automatically it's also Matame Tame Mace. Then not only does it become Tame from someone who lies on it, it'll also become Tame as a Keli if something touches it. And this is a Chiddush, because normally Pshute Kliyets are not Makabal Tuma, unless they could be Makabal something, unless they have some type of receptacle. But if they're made to lie upon, and therefore they're Matama Tumas Medrus, then they're also Matama every other type of Tuma, even though it's not a Keli. So that's a good trivia question. What Pshute Kliyets can be Matama, even though you can't use it as a Keli? The answer is if you could lie upon it. So let's see Rashi, because Rashi elaborates a little bit on this halacha. So it's yesodistic for Shas, so it's probably worthwhile seeing it inside. So Zok Gemara, the Chachamim say. So let's go back here. Matamis Tame Mace. These are those mats. Kloiber Klihen. They are a keli. Minastam. Makabel Tuma. These things are kelim and they're makabel Tuma. We're going to have to see what function they do, because the Tanakama said that the Matama Tumas Mace are not Tumas Medrus. So they have to have some type of function. Behind the Nukat, Tame Mace, why did you use the word Tame Mace? If we mean to say that it's Makabel Tuma, so it could be Makabel Tuma Sheretz, it could be Makabel any type of Tuma. What's up is the Tanakama used the word Tumas Mace. Mishum the boil of Fluge, the Medrus, Shu Avatuma. Because the Bar Plukt of the Tanakama, the Chachamim say that it's also Tumas Medrus. Tumas Medrus happens to be an Avatuma. So when the Tana gave an example of a contact Tuma, it gave an example of a contact Tuma that would also be an Avatuma. But really, when he says Matama is Tame Mace, it means any Tuma that comes through contact. And this is what the Tanakama means. Whatever these chaytlois are, they're considered a keli, l'tuma. But they're not things that people lie upon, and therefore they're not matama tumas medrus. They will not become an avatuma if a zov steps on it, because they're not things that are designed to step on. The only way these mats, or I shouldn't say mats, these chaytlois, the only way they can become an avatuma is al yidei mace atzma. Only if they touch an actual mace. So you aim to me'as mace to very abdois. Because if they touch anything else, if they touch a sheretz, which is a nav, the mat will only become a rishai. So the only way for the mat to actually become a nav is if it touches a mace itself, which is an aviyah voice. However, if you're matama tumas medrus, then if a zav walks over it, it'll automatically become an avatum. Now, Reb Doisa doesn't hold it. Not only can it become an avatuma by touching a mace, it could also become an avatuma if a zav walks on it. Because these chaytlois are made to lie upon. Medrus in Tama Mace loy bitmiya. The Gemara asks if it's Tama Tumas Medrus, it's also by default Matama Tumas Mace. But non kala Matama Medrus Matama Tama Mace. So this is the important Rashi. If it's Matama Tumas Medrus, it's also susceptible to every type of Tuma. Like if it touches a sheretz or nevela. By the Naka Tama Mace, the reason why it chapped on Tama Mace, Rashi repeats, is the Avatuma Mairi, is because we're discussing an Avatuma. This is what the Brisa means to say. Anything that becomes an Avatuma through Medrus, then automatically we apply to it all Avatumas. The only things that are Matama Medrus are things that are designed to lie upon. They're made to do Medrus upon. The Shavi, since you could lie on it, let's see what the test says, because that changes the gears. Given the Osri, Lutashmish Kli, since it's made to be used, even if it's just to lie upon, we give it the status of a Keli. The Cholshu Keli Lemedris, anything that's a Keli, because you could lie on it, automatically Mitame Bechol Tuma, Fafilahu Pshute Kliyates. Now it's Mitame with everything, even if it's Pshute Kliyates, which normally would not be Makabal Tum. The Alfin lay the Kabal Chaber B'Sef Shabbos. Okay, the Sefer the Mishnah. The Sefer that Mishnah is V'Yeshu Matame Tamimeis, Vein Matame Medus. There are things that are only a keli, but they're not Tamei Medus. V'Hainu Mashu Kli. If it's a keli, Aval Edim Yuchad L'Shiva. If something is a keli, it's a piece of wood that can hold something. It has a receptacle in it. It will be Matame, but it's not something that people sit on. So therefore, it won't have Tumas Medris. The Mitame B'Chala Tuma is Chutz Medris Shim Shachav Olav Azov. If Azov lied on it, but didn't touch it, he just put his weight on it, Torah, it will be Torah. Because the Lagabi Medris from Yuchad Lakach Be'inah. In order for something to be Tomei Machmas Tumas Medris, it has to be something that's designed to walk upon. Kedamrinon, like the Gemara says, which is a very important term, is Yotzazeh. It excludes from Tumas Medris anything that Azov sat on, but we tell him, if I have a lunchbox, and the guy and the Zav sits on it, I'm not going to let him stay there. I'll say, pal, can you get off my lunchbox? I need it. So anything like that, anything that you would tell the Zav, could you please get up? You're not using it properly. I need it. If I have a big a toolbox and the Medrash sits on it, I'll say, sir, can you please get up? I need my toolbox. That's not Matama Tumas Medrash. So we now have a machlokes by Chaytzlach, whatever they are, if they're Matama Tumas Medrash or not. Zok to Gemara. What are these things? My chaytzlos. What are these mysterious chaytzlos where there's a machlokes whether or not they are things that you sleep on? Amar Avdime Bar Hamduri, it's Marzuvli. Zok Gemara, that's a very sophisticated word, but I still don't know what you're talking about. My Marzuvli. Amar Baba Mizavli. So what are Mizavli? So Rashi tells us that Mizavli are like sacks that the shepherds use and they lie on them sometimes. Bullus. I don't think that's what it was, but there are things that they were made out of, I guess, these reeds that the royim would lie upon, and I guess that's why, at least there's an argument from the chachamim that they're metame tumas medus. It's made out of leather. Okay, it's a leather bag that are kalim for sure. They're made to. I guess there's a leather bag that the shepherd stores his tools in, but he sometimes uses them to lie upon as well, and therefore there could be a machlokes as to whether or not these are made l'shchim. Okay, that makes sense. Zok to Gemara, they're regular mats. That's what they are. They're regular mats, and it's a machlokes if a regular mat is made l'shchiva. But there is shlokish latamei, and Rish Lakish here is consistent with another thing that he said. Rish Lakish. Hareini kaparis Rabchia Ubanav. And Rashi tells us this when someone's parents are nifter, you say Hareini kaparis mechskavai. My actions, and I should be a kapara for any averis that he did. So Rish Lakish is saying it like Rabbi Rabchia, even though Rish Lakish wasn't Rabchia's child, but in deference, in respect of Rabchia, he said that. Hareini kaparis Rabchia Ubanav. Why is that? Why do I have so much respect for Rabchia Ubanav? Shabitchila kishanishtach Torah Yisrael. The first time that much of the Torah was forgotten, and this was by Galus Bavel after Churban Bayis Rishon. Allah Ezra mi Bavel. Ezra brought us up from Bavel into Yerushalayim again. The Yista, and he set up these halachas again, and he brought the lost halachas back to us. Chazra v'nishtachah, once again by the second Churban Bayis, they were forgotten. Allah Hillel Abavli v'Yista. Hillel Abavli helped us regain those halachas that we lost. And then Chazav and Ishtacha, once again, there was some confusion in Klal Yisrael, and halachas were forgotten, and Olu Reb Chia Banav v'Yistua. Reb Chia Banav brought it back. Reb Chia was known to create Torah that shouldn't be forgotten. Reb Chia once said, if I ever had the opportunity to create a scenario where Torah shouldn't be forgotten, what I would do is I would plant flax, and with the flax I would make nets, and with the nets I would catch deer, and with the deer I would check them and serve its meat, the Yosaimim and Almanos, and with its hide I would make Torah, and I would teach people Torah with those Torahs that I make. And that'll make that Torah shouldn't be forgotten. There's a beautiful shtickle called the Vilna Gaon on it, but since we don't have time, I'll just go weiter. The Kachamar Reb Chia Ban, but Reb Chia was known that he wanted to make Torah like the Shtach Yisrael. And this is what he said. Rab Doisa and Chachamim are not arguing about the mats that are found in Usha. Why is that? Same Tameos. They are for sure Tamei. Rashi says, Af Medris. They're Tamei Tumas Medris. The Miyuchadash L'Shchivahin. The mats of Usha are designed to sit on, and therefore they're for sure Tamei Tumas Medris. Vishal Tveria, and they're not arguing about the mats from Tveria Chain Torahs. Rashi says because they're very rough and tough and they're not comfortable to sit on. Alman Nechlaku. Where is this machlokes as to whether or not these machzalas are Tamei Tumas Medris or not? Al Shar Makaimis, from the mats that are brought from other places. Mar Savar, one mandamer says, like Abdoisa, even the Leka the Yosef Alayu, since people don't sit on them. Rashi says, Ein Roiv B'nei Adam, Rechilin L'Yachta B'kach. Most people don't use them to sit on, Kidit Tveryadan. So they're all like those mats from Tverya that people don't sit on. Mar Savar, and the Chachamim hold, even the Mikri, the Yasvi Alayu, since from time to time, it does happen that people use those mats to sit upon. We'll treat them like Usha and we'll say they're made l'shchiva. So basically, the machlokes is how common does it have to be for this type of mat to be able to be for this type of mat to be used l'shchiva to consider it Tamei Tumas Medris? Does it have to be how it's always used for, or could it even be occasionally used for that?
Because here you're saying in Usha, they make them for Shiva, so they're automatically going to be.
Well, Dois is focusing on how soft it is, how hard it is.
Isn't the best what you're going to use it for?
Yeah, so Dois seems to be learning what do people use it for. What is the normal thing?
Like the math of Usha, even if you would say I'm going to use it for stock, that it would be the time.
Let's have a see. So you're asking me, these are all stoma. You want to know what if I specifically had kavana to use it for something?
How would Rabbi Eliezer?
How would that fit into Rabbi Eliezer? In other words, could you have a specific one? So I don't see anywhere who says it's the favorites, but I think it makes sense that the shilas that we're discussing now are all about what the default is. But if you like hard mats and you decide you want to sit on a hard mat and you're using it as shchiva, do you say batla daita, or do you say that since you're using it for that, maybe it would be used for that?
But the mats of Usha,
they're soft and everybody uses them to sit on.
Right.
So by default, they are ones that people sit on.
But if you want to use it for stock, then
you couldn't use it for schach because it's for kabel tuma.
The opposite of what Rabbi Eliezer said.
Why? Rabbi Eliezer said all mats by default are to sit on. Rabbi Eliezer was the machmer then. The final pshat was the machmer. The Chachamim say big mats are stam l'schach and small mats are not. So let's see more about it. But once again, it seems like here the question is what they're normally for. But could you have specific amount to change that? Probably yes, but we didn't see that inside. So Zok to more about it. Amamar, kol hachutzlois mitamin tamemeis divrei Abdoisa. Abdoisa said that all of these chutzlois are mitamin tamemeis and not tumas medris. But Tanya we learned. We had the earlier Abdoisa who said that Zuv is Misachachamba. If we remember right before we learned the brisa of Chaitzlois, we learned about the Machzala Shal Shiva V'Shal Gemi, and Abdoisa's comments at the end of that was Achazu v'Achazu Misachachamba. You can use them all for Schach. So clearly, Abdoisa is saying that all of these are not made in the Medris. So if all of these are not made lemedris, all of these are not makabel tuma at all. All the different types of mats you can use for schach, meaning they're not kalim at all. So how is it possible that Abdoisa said that these mats are matama tumas meis? Now, if you remember, we had a question: what are chaitzlos? On one shot they were mats. On the other shot they were these special saddlebags made out of leather. So the Gemara here is asking, if you hold that chaitzlos are mats, then they're the same mats that Reb Doisa was talking about earlier, and Reb Doisa said earlier that they're kosher for schach. So how could you say over here that Reb Doisa says that they're matama tumas meis? I have a tiny b'chenei Reb Doisa that they're good for schach. It's like a dafna, less like a dafna. Everybody knows that if you roll up the rim, in the rim, there's a place that can hold something. So these mats as well, along their edges, if they had a rim, then that rim makes it that it's a clay kibble, and therefore it will be tamei. And that's what Reb Doisha was talking about over here when he said they're matama tamas mace. The mats that we're referring to earlier, where Reb Doisha says you can use them for schach, those are mats that have no rim at all, and therefore they're not makabel tum at all, and they're good for schach. So the rim makes the difference. Meis defekt gemara. Chaytzloi shel sha'im v'shel gemi v'shel sak v'shel svira. So mats made out of any one of these products. So some of them I know what they are, some of them I don't. So shem is kavayel min shifa. I'm not sure what that is. It's almost an art scroll. It's type of plant. Sak we know is made out of the noich of vizim. It's made out of it's not called fur, but the fibers that you take out of goats. And safira is when you trim the neck, the mane, or the tail of a horse. So horsehair, those are all matame mace. So mats that are made out of any of these products are matame tamer mace. Divrei abdoisa, chachamim ma'imrim af medrash. They're tame tamas medrash. So for example, bishlam l'man d'amar marzuvli. If you're going to learn on Amar Aleph, the machlokes, which is this side of the chaytzlos, are these bags that the shepherds use to hold their stuff. So the question is, why would Reb Doisa hold the tamei mace? The chachamim hold the tamei medrash because you lie on it. Sometimes you use it as a pillow. Once you sometimes use it as a pillow, it doesn't have to do anything else. Automatically, it's makabel every type of tuma. But according to Reb Doisa, where we say the fact that the shepherd lies and it doesn't have any impact, that means these bags on their own have to be able to contain something. So what is it that they're going to contain? So Zok to Gemara, if they're bags, what would they be used for? If they're made of shemer which have big holes in them, they can hold big pairs that won't slip through the holes. So sakva sofira, if these are sacks that have smaller holes in them, gulki vitsani, they can be used to hold gulki vitsani, which Rashi says are kalim ke'ein sakin shenoisnavem kitniyos upeirs dakin. You put in small bottles or small pairs, they can hold smaller things. If you learn that this machlokes is by mats, I understand what you can use a mat that's made out of sak and sphira. They're relatively nice type of materials. You can use them as wall hangings, which are decorative, or they can be used as a doorway, as a curtain to block for a privacy curtain to block a doorway. What are you going to use them for? You're not going to be using them for anything at all. So how could they be a keli according to Abdullah? So and Rashi says they can be used as a bottle stopper. And since they can be used as a bottle stopper, they're keli. Tosfos jumps on Rashi and says a bottle stopper is not a keli. In order for it to be keli, it has to be able to contain something. So Tosfos says the Nizios is not a bottle stopper. Tosfos says that it's something that could hold something. That's the last line of the second Tosfos. Niziosa is not just a bottle stopper, it's something that can actually contain something, although Tosfos doesn't define what that is. If you learn that they're regular mats, then shall she'em v'shal gemi chazal niziosa. You can use these type of mats for the niziosa, whether you learn like Rashi that it's a stopper, or like Tosfos that it can hold something. Shall sak v'shal sphira chazal parsiv nafasa. You can use them as curtains or as tapestries. If you hold it to sack, if you hold like a bag that the shepherd holds things in, I understand the chazil lagulki b'tani can hold smaller pairs. What would you use that for? Chazil look into the pair, you can use it to hold larger pairs. So no matter how you learn, this sack has function not only to lie on, but it also has function to use as a container for something. Tanya Merchina. this is fascinating historically, is that Reb Chanina said, when I went down out of Eretz Yisrael into Golis, into Bavel, and why did I go there? Look, Rashi, the fourth to the last Rashi in the parak, Sheyored L'Goyla L'Aver Shana. It seems like when they had to make a decision as to whether or not they should add another Adar, the decision was not made in Eretz Yisrael, it was made in Bavel. I guess that's where the main Talmidei Chachamim were located. So Matzasi Zakan Echad, I found an old person, and he said, Nesachin bebudja. You're allowed to use budja for schach. Budja is a mat, so it's a machzelas again. Uchashabasi etel Rabbi Yeshua Achiaba. When I came to Rabbi Yeshua, my uncle, Haidel Advarab, he agreed that you're allowed to use these mats as schach. Amar Chista, Vuda less like it's fana. The only time you can use a mat if it doesn't have a rim, because if it has a rim, then it's going to be a container and it'll be makabelton. Amar Ula, Hani Budisa, the Bnei Mechuzah, the mats from the people of Mechuzah, Il Malek Hirshalahen, if they didn't have a rim, they would be perfect for schach. But since they have a rim, you can't use it for schach. Tanya Namihachi, Nisachin the Budja, you're allowed to use mats as schach, in Yeshlan Kir, but if they have a rim, then in Misachin Bahen, then you can't use them from schach, for schach, Hadin Alach Sukkah, Hadin Alach Sukkah, B'Neder, Hadin Alach Sukkah. Let's quickly hop around the Mishnah. Hayoshan Takas Amita B'Sukkah. What if you sleep under your bed in a sukkah? So is the bed an oil into of itself that you're no longer in the sukkah? Zok the Mishnah, Lo Yotzi De Chevosai, you will not be Yotzi. I'm Rabbi Yehuda, I don't know why you say that. We always slept in front of the Zakanim, underneath the beds in the sukkah. They didn't tell us that there's a problem. So I hold up to you that you are allowed to sleep under a bed in a sukkah. I'm Rab Shimon. Rab Shimon said, I'll tell you a story that'll prove you the opposite. There was once a story with Tevi, the servant of Rabbi Gamliel, who was known to be a Talmid Chacham. He was sleeping under the sukkah, under the bed in the sukkah. And Rabbi Gamliel was showing off what a smart Eved he has. He says, listen, we're here in a squishy sukkah. Tavi knows that if he would sleep on a regular bed, it would take up too much space. And because of that, somebody else might not have room to sleep in the sukkah. So look at what a smart guy he was. He knows Avadim are part of the sukkah. So you know what he did? In order not to take up a bed, so Tosfos asks, then why didn't he just sleep inside if he was worried about taking up a bed? So Tosfos tells us that the Talmidei Chachamim in the sukkah were schmoozing and learning. He didn't want to miss that. He wanted to be there, but he didn't want to take up a space. So therefore, he slept under a bed. However, but based on using our Jewish logic, our Talmudic logic, we can figure out from this conversation, that proves that you're not Yotzei. That's exactly why Rabbi Gamliel was so excited that his servant knew not to sleep, or not to sleep on the bed, to display someone, rather sleep under a bed. How could you say that sleeping under a bed, you're not Yotzei? It's not 10 tefachim high underneath the bed. So if it's not 10 tefachim high underneath the bed, why would that be considered an oil that's mafsik which you do in the sukkah? No, the type of bed that you're not allowed to sleep under is a bed that's 10 tefachim high. So that's already a proper oil, and that's why it's going to be a problem. Okay, I guess we'll stop here because this gets into a new subject. So everybody have a wonderful.
Yosy.
Yes.
Yeah, Yosy. Could you explain why does it change the kli if you put a mat on it? If you put a rim around the mat? And I just want to compare it to the bamboo.
If you have a rim, then you can put stuff in it.
It's not just a little decorative rim. It has to be a practical rim that now I can store something in.
It has to be a rim that you can roll up.
What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean you can store something.
You roll the mat?
Yeah. You could store. It has to be something that you would be able to store something in. I don't know, maybe hide some coins in there or some candies. Yeah, it has to be something you could store something in.
So what's the issue then with the bamboo mats that we have?
Why do you say that there's an issue with them?
I think at one point there was an issue, and there is a mat. I can't use just a regular mat. You know, if you're going to call Chinatown and ask them for a mat, it can't be one.
The issue that you have with mats is if you use threads to bind them together, that are makabel tuma, then you have a problem. It's important that every single component of the mat, even the parts that tie them together, should all be things that are not makabel tuma. So that's one of the important things, is that they have to be tied together with gedoyle karka, like other reeds. But if they use
Like
some type
straw.
of thread, but if they use a thread, like sometimes they use cotton thread or yarn to hold these pieces together, and that yarn is makabel tuma.
It's not going like this, that if it was made, the star mat is going to be made with metric.
Well, no matter what the mat's made for, if it has in it components that are makabel tuma.
Let's say it's a completely organic mat that's not made from refined material, but it was made not for top.
It was specifically to use to lie on.
Yeah.
Then there would be a problem.
So it's not just that what it's made of; it's the machshava of.
Correct. In other words, in order to be kosher, you can't just make it out of the right ingredients and assume it's kosher. You also need to make sure that the intention of when it was made for schach. So you know that the schach mats, for sure they didn't have kavanah when they made it to make it to lie on, because that will kill its value. It's worth a lot more as a schach mat. See, in the olden days, it was worth more as a lying mat than as a schach mat. But nowadays, it's exactly the opposite.
Right. All right.
You have kavanah to the highest value usage. Like when you buy a property, what's the highest value usage on this mat?
Sign that says.
The same schach. Well,
Yeah,
I remember
yes.
we once found in a warehouse where there were Chinese women eating sandwiches, sewing the matzah covers for a company. Azaki, what did you say?
No, I think that, to find schach in those days was not such an easy thing. So they had to use, whatever they had. You can't just go and buy a roll. I think about we get schach, you got to go to a tree and chop it down. Eitzim also was a challenge. Where did they find schach? Right? Because the walls they were able to use because it was a kli, it was makabel tuma. But here to find something that was not unfinished, they didn't have this disposable society to be able to do it. So finding a schach was a challenge. And by the way, that the chachamim didn't say anything. These are the same chachamim who went to Helenia Malka's house. See nothing, hear nothing. Every place they're going, they're not going to say anything.
But there's a big difference when they're by donors and when they're by Talmidim.
Right.
So I thought you were going to tell me, because you always bring out the spiritual side of things. I thought you were going to say, why is it so important that schach shouldn't be makabel tuma? The teretz is because the sukkah is creating a sheltered environment for us to be sheltered from the bad ideas and the bad influences of the world. So the schach has to be something that's not makabel tuma, because it has to actually repel any type of tuma, any type of bad thing. It has to protect us from all of the bad influences of the world. So surely the schach has to be made out of something that repels any type of tuma that's absorbed from the world.
Right. Well, it had, correct. That's why the walls are okay. The walls can be makabel tuma, because that's going to support you using that to achieve to be makabel tuma. You have to
so what you're saying is you could use the money of the wealthy, even though it's not perfectly clean money, to support the schach. But the Talmidei Chacham themselves that protect life shall have to be pure.
Correct. Very good.
Okay, Shkai, have a wonderful day. Are you already on your way back?
Yeah, I'm on my way back.
Okay, have a very, very safe trip.
Okay, thank you.
Shkai, everybody, have a very safe trip.